Hello, family. Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I'm your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. That's right, you just heard my dog sneeze in the background. She is on road with me today. Let's go. So, what are we hitting? DNC Day 2 and the case of the missing protests, which I'll explain near the end. I gotta tell y'all, the DNC had me last night. It really had me in a chokehold. I am furious about it. I'm so upset. I'm just furious. So the energy in that arena, I mean, it was full to the rafters. We're talking, ceiling to basement. Energy was electric. Family, I gotta tell you, I was fed the American glizzy last night, and I ate of the American glizzy. I got to tell you, I don't want it. I didn't want it, but it was nice. I'm not going to lie. I have been, for a moment, lived out. I'm lived out because I got to tell you something. They had me so good last night at the DNC. They had me so lived out for a minute on that American glizzy that it had me thinking about Joe Biden. And I said, you know what? Maybe, he needed to go, but maybe we were too hard on him a little bit when it came to just the day-to-day. That's what that American glizzy had me thinking. It was like, maybe he wasn't just freezing up on the largest debate stage in the world. Maybe a nigga was just trying to take in the vibes. Maybe Joe Biden was just trying to take in the vibes. Maybe that's what it was. He needed to go. But they had me fooled. I'm just like, maybe he was just trying to live his life. But for real, all jokes aside, the DNC really is just like the glizzy. It looks good, it tastes good, but it lacks nutritional value, and you're gonna feel it later. Do you know what I mean? It's not gonna sit right later. We need substance, and we need sustainability, and we need it now. So with that, what were the wins? Doug Emhoff, I think we can say that beautiful Muppet of a man, he is so sweet. He doesn't talk like a politician. He doesn't act like a politician. He doesn't move like a politician. But hearing him champion Kamala Harris as the person, the human, was a good look, right? He comes across as warm and as regular and human. And those are sometimes misses for Kamala Harris. Now, I'm very, very keen on seeing what she comes out with post Day 2, post the Obamas, post the introduction and reintroduction, right? So I'm all for it. I'm all for Doug championing his girl. I'll just say this. That's his job, right? That's his job. We still need to see all the things that we need to see. So who was the second winner there? It bodes well for their movement, I say that. So what's the second win? Bernie Sanders went full butch last night. He went full fucking butch. He put on his slacks. He put the garters on his socks. He slicked back his hair, and he went to town at the DNC. He was butched up, and he was full of fire. I'm here for it. Whereas some pundits say that it was just an endless list of things that he hates, right? I'm like, no, you're misinterpreting the Brooklyn Jewish accent, okay? He was handling business. Those were hits. You were sleep. Those were hits. He hit us with the hits. I got to tell you, he went after corporate power. He went after money in politics. He brought up, again, oligarchy, which is a word that actually applies here, but we kind of run back from, which I'm okay with. I'm like, it took years to get fascist in, and I don't even know if it slaps the way it needs to, but he brought it up. But what was the standout moment, right? I mean, we got the kind of Bernie Sanders that brought that fervor, that looked at the big money and big politics in 2017. We felt some of that. But what was it really that made him stand out? What was it really that felt like that 2016 Bernie? He explicitly called for an end of war in Gaza, and that Israel must stop their assault. That might not seem like enough, right? And like I've said, and I'll say again, nothing ever is. I don't even know if at the end of this, should it end, and we have to do everything we can to make it so. It is so hard to say that's a win. when so much death and so much destruction happens, which is partly why it's so imperative that we have every hand on every lever that we possibly can pull. But I'll tell you, this is the first politician of his status that said it explicitly. AOC came close, right? She said, Kamala Harris is working tirelessly too. And I'm like, maybe, I guess we'll find out. But Bernie Sanders came out swinging, and you got to ask yourself, what was the response in that room, right? Because this is the guy back in 2016 that made us realize we're not nuts. There is a big difference between establishment Dems like Schumer and Pelosi and the powers that be and Jeffries and the other old losers, right? And these two things, one doesn't equal the other. They are gangster-ass old people. We just don't have them where we need them. So what was the response? When he issued the call to end Israel's assault, the hall erupted. It was loud, it was boisterous, it was a roar, and it was a reminder of the fact that the Biden administration failed, where the Biden administration failed to address something that is imperative and important to progressives, to liberals, to Democrats, and all the other folks who are cool. Not those ones I just named, but the rest of us were freaking cool as hell. It was a reminder that this is what we want, this is what we demanded, this is what we said was important. Now, I gotta tell you, maybe Biden could have been coasting on some better vibes than the one that he was searching for if he had been able to garner the kind of excitement that he did. It wasn't simply that he's an old guy who looked old and feeble. It was that he didn't have anything of substance to say or anything of substance to offer in a time when we need it most. This is one of the first times I can say that I've seen such unity across our side, let alone the other side, but they're kind of weird because they really are dabbling in the whole anti-Semitism thing to like make their point across the right. Losers. But eliminate them, and it's still a bipartisan issue for the most part. And the failure to capture that energy, capture that momentum, capture that unity is a failure that the Biden administration must carry, vibes or no vibes. So let's get that arms embargo on the fucking books. Let's get the ceasefire on the books. Enforce it. It can happen now. End funding to Israel now. It's that simple. It's what the vast majority of Democrats want. And I got to tell you, that night, last night in the DNC, that was very obvious. That was clear. So that was a win. And there's one other thing that we got to shout out Bernie for. He said abroad a bunch of times, right? He said quite a bit. First of all, it's perfect in that Brooklyn Jew accent, perfect. But second of all, I love it because abroad can now mean overseas, or it could be our next president. And I'm here for it. I would love to call the president abroad. Let's go. Let's go. That's a shout out to all my little punny honeys out there. Anyway, I'm here for my guy, Bernie Sanders. I know that he has been a disappointment here or there, but he's actually, for the most part, held the line. I love my little matzo ball. And if you can't get down with him, that's okay. But I know who he is to me. So, who are the other big swingers and big hitters? Michelle and Barack Obama. They came out with that 1-2 Obama special, and I got to tell you, they were so well lotioned. They were so incredibly well lotioned. They were just moisturized. They looked good. They felt good. And let me tell you, when I started this thing, I did not expect to be sitting here glazing the Obamas, but here we are. I'm furious about it. I'm furious. So Michelle went first. And there's one thing, there's a bunch of things that she can do that Barack doesn't do, right? But the area in terms of the yapping part that she specializes in is sincerity, because she low-key hates politicians. She low-key hates politicians. She hates the way they sound, the way they act, the way they move. She's like Kendrick when it comes to politicians. It's why, despite calls, at sometimes desperate calls, for her to please pick up the mantle, she was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing this. And you know what? Good for her. But I'll tell you, because she doesn't want to be a politician, because she doesn't get down with politicians, she can actually speak with sincerity as somebody who doesn't love it, but gets it because she's so close to power and understands how it works, right? And she comes across as coming from such a real place. And I got to tell you, When I say that, I mean, she had these micro braids that were plaited Viking style. By the way, that is a style very underused by white people. I'm just like, those braids are fantastic, those plaids. Do that. That is such a good look. Anyway, she came out, micro braids in this amazing Viking style plait, and I got to tell you, she came out swinging. She was coming for a fight. She went straight for Donald Trump's throat. She was stepping on the necks of everybody that is a bigot. It was pretty splendid. Like, she did not come to play. And I'd say the thing that she did best, right? I'm listening to her speak, and once I was like, oh God, just black people look so good on a screen. Once I got past that part, what I realized that she did so well, I want you to think back to, 6 months ago. Just 6 months ago, for example. Think about how ominous Donald Trump felt, right? Think about how outsized, how larger than life the threat of him was. We know that democracy, whether you use air quotes or not, right, to describe this place that we live in, it is very much still on the chopping blocks. But what she did was she invited us to look at him through her eyes. And what you saw was a petty, unimpressive, stupid man. And you know what? I loved it. I loved it. So that invitation, that edge that she came in, let me tell you something. Michelle Obama came with an edge sharper than her knee-high stiletto Balenci's. You know what I mean? Like, she came and she used that to step on the necks of our enemies. It was sharp as fuck. She was sharp as fuck. I'm here for it. So, Barack Obama. For all my haters out there, I'm sorry to report, he was fucking spectacular. I'm sorry. You know, if you know me on some level, or, you know, you were introduced to me on the streets, you know that I love talking to people about things, but it's my favorite when I can feel them. And it's my favorite at protests and at these political moments, because that's where, in a way, I was born. You know, it's where I found myself. I found myself in other people. And there are so few places where you can feel that and do that outside of politics. And it annoys me to no end that I felt that from that man. It was not, God, he's so fucking good. And he went for the heart. I can think of top 5 speakers alive. I can think of top 10 speakers dead. He has it. He just has a gift. And you can dislike him, but he's also fucking handsome. He's a double threat. If you could maybe, you know, if he wasn't the president, that would be more awesome. If he was kind of like an underdog. He's like not an underdog. He's very much not an underdog. So I'm not like cheering for him. But my God, was he good. Where Michelle Obama went for the neck of our enemies, he went for the heart of our friends. That's what he did well, that bitch. He did it so well. Oh my God. He used evocative, down-to-earth language that basically brought, there goes my dog sneezing again. That was about giving people, everyone, a fair shot. That was about being able to mind your own business and the value add that happens when we have the barest modicum of equality. Women making the same amount as men in terms of salaries just is better for families. He reduced things just to basic common sense without falling into the annoying common decency diatribe we used to have to go through. Diatribe wasn't the right word, but just roll with it. That we had to go through that language, that rhetoric. It's different now. It feels different now. What's needed is different now, right? He talked about the need to be able to make decisions about our own lives. And how once we're able to do that, if we're allowed to do that, then other people should also be allowed to do that. They're allowed to make decisions that are different than ours, and that's okay. And when you hear the Obamas, everybody's mom and dad, right? Sometimes we hate our parents, sometimes we love them. But everybody's mom and dad, when you hear them say, it's okay, it kind of conveys that it is. They spent a little bit too much time talking about how everybody makes mistakes, and I'm like, who's everybody? Okay, because it's a little different when you're the president. Okay, a little bit different. You have whole teams of people and whole campaign managers and an entire staff that are there to help you not make mistakes. The mistakes that I'm here for somebody with that much power is like a bus not running on time. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can miss a bus. You could be late for a speech. Dropping drones and bombs on people, I'm not sure if that's what counts as just human beings making mistakes from his vantage point. I'm not sure. But I'd like to believe that he's just trying to, humanize it in a way that kind of equalizes the playing field. And I appreciate it, but it doesn't really slap. It didn't slap the way I wanted it to. What was the standout moment for me? Michelle Obama recently lost her mother. She talked about it on stage. And, Barack used the experiences of his mother-in-law and his grandmother that raised him, right? One, a black woman from the south side of Chicago. The other, a white woman from Kansas, from a small place that I can't remember the name of for some reason. That tells you how small it was. And, he made a riff off of that. That was fucking excellent. A bunch of people cheered when he said the small place in Kansas, and he said, I know there's not that many people there. And then everybody laughed, and I was once again furious because he is so good at this. But it was a beautiful story. It was a juxtaposition about these two women, right, and their hard work and their integrity and what it felt like to have a good meal and laughter around a kitchen table. That was literally a quote of his, right? And how important it was for these two women who had come from such different walks of life to see their children go to places they never imagined for themselves. These were people, he said, that were not impressed by braggarts and bullies. And you know what? That was the most powerful part of his speech. Right around that time that Barack Obama was speaking, they cut to a black lady who had one of those, a little tear that was just slow rolling down her face. Perfect timing. I'm like, did you look for her? Did you know she was going to do that? It reminded me of that horrific, do you guys remember that 1970s ad with that native man with the tear rolling down his face? It was like that. It was annoying like that because we were destroying the environment, and we still are. Do you remember that? Also, random, but do you also remember a film called Indian in the Cupboard? What the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? What? Anyway, a reminder that Standing Rock fucking happened, and people are still dealing with charges around that. Remember that there's legacies to all these protests and movements that are happening. And I just wanted to give a shout out to those folks out there because they're actually the caretakers of the land and are risking life and limb to do it, even when we're not following them and even when the movements don't seem that big. People are always doing good work. And you know what? That's incredible to me. That's a great way to pivot to the last point, one of the last points. Actually, well, I'll just say, I'll quickly add Lil Jon. Okay, Lil Jon doing the DNC roll call for Georgia. At first, I was like, this smacks of corniness. But then I kept seeing Lil Jon and hearing Lil Jon and the okay around the backdrop of the DNC that's usually stuffy and preachy. And I was like, you know what? I'll slide that in the wins. But my last win, right? I got to tell you this. For the DNC, this is absolutely the most odd time, the weirdest time, the biggest win. There were two gays that the camera found at the DNC. Two black gays, right? And these were like gay with a capital F. I know you know the types I'm talking about, right? They had the little tiny mustaches that were perfect, and they had dangly American flag earrings. And I'm like, do you know how hard it is to pin down like black fags anywhere? Do you know how difficult it is to get them to arrive anywhere on time? They're the life of the party, okay? But flakiest MFs on the planet, truly. Always worth it to get them there. But the flakiest fuck, it is impressive. It is impressive that they were there. For every two black fags that you have in an audience, that represents 1,000 people. That's how impactful that was. And they were nodding and they were moved. They were there on time. Okay, if you know, you know. That's significant. That's a huge win. Who are the losers? Chuck Schumer. I'll say no more on that. The end. Chuck Schumer. The other thing, having Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker go on directly after Bernie Sanders and then brag about being a billionaire. Fucking loser moment for everyone that was, who made it, whoever made the program. Did somebody vet that speech? What was going on there? What was going on in our heads? Bernie Sanders is like, F billionaires, F corporate power, F big money in politics, and then we're just going to peddle out our billionaire? I guess, though, I don't know how many people would qualify in the DNC if we made it about money. Anyway, Tony Evers, Wisconsin governor, kind of fumbled the bag. It's almost like he low-key forgot Kamala Harris's name. I'm just going to say he was just overwhelmed by the excitement. I might let him pass for that. And the last loser moment, right, is the undercurrent of scolding that was sometimes present, right, in the speeches for those that was directed to anybody critical of the Democratic Party at this time, right? It was there with the Obamas. It was there, with everyone else. And yes, they were talking about unity and timing and everything else. And I agree with those points. But to criticize something, as James Baldwin reminds us often, is to love it. And that does not mean that you love America, but your home and what it could be, and that you see what the potential of it is. And you know what? That's always worth mentioning. That's always worth fighting for. So on to the next, the case of the missing protests, right? When this whole DNC thing was happening, and when the organizers in Chicago knew that this was happening, they slated and they said they were prepared for tens of thousands of protesters. That's what they prepared themselves for, right? But they're not there. They're not there. The organizers said that they would shut down the DNC for Gaza, right? And what I expected was that this would maybe be something like 1968, where during the Democratic Convention, the demonstrations just had the city entangled, right? They shook the party up. And these particular groups, right, they were like, we want to get killer Kamala, we want to hold her accountable, we want to hold Genocide Joe accountable. They anticipated, and these are actual organizations, right, like, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, etc., right? They anticipated 30 to 40,000 people, protesters, were going to be on hand during Monday's kickoff. And I've been following this closely. On that day, only a few thousand people showed up, right? Around 3,500. Laying across the floor, and there's a bunch of, super lefty streamers who were there. There's, like, the point is, I'm not just getting this from mainstream media outlets that always minimize our shit. Like, I'm seeing the actual footage from multiple angles and multiple people, many of whom are trusted and vetted. I saw piles of signs that were supposed to be in people's hands, lifting them up. Victory to the Palestine resistance, and all the other things. They had paint ready to put blood on the hands, and, there were signs that said, Killer Kamala and Genocide Joe. That first day of the protest, that was the most successful one. Later on, in a protest march, 100 people attended, right? A protest march in the DNC and this group is called the Poor People's Army. I guess they delayed the start by 90 minutes because they weren't reaching critical mass, right? And just to give you some idea of how stark that must have felt for them, Jill Stein was there. So they had done their work. They had the infrastructure, right? They were going to hit this convention. They wanted to talk about crimes against humanity, and nobody showed up. Whose fault is it? Or is there a fault? I want to say that this sucks. I understand, but it's okay. Look, let me explain what needs to happen right now. And what I mean, like in yesterday and a few episodes, I said it's about seizing the momentum and guiding it where it needs to be. Let me explain what I need, right? What I mean by that. For one, you have to understand that people, just as a baseline, human beings, we're annoying. You tell us something, we think the other thing. If you're like me, you're stubborn, and I have to find things out the hard way. I'm very irritating that way, but we have this itch when somebody presents something as a full, conclusive thing that doesn't line up with our stories, we immediately want to push back against it. Now, imagine that from 30,000 feet up. If there's a popular belief or a popular narrative, and you come against that directly, right? And I've talked about how much that doesn't work. Do you know, it works really well when you go against the right. That makes a lot of sense. You can take liberties when you go against the right because, well, if you are a person who supports fascism, if you're a person who hates trans people, if you're a person who is anti-abortion, etc., you can make real judgments on a person's character. And also, we don't have to give a fuck about them. Like, we really don't. It doesn't work so well when we're technically, and I'm using technically, on the same side, right? It's harder. And so what you've seen is a shift in momentum. With Joe Biden, there was a clear enemy and a person, and I use enemy literally and loosely, right? He was somebody that needed to do something that was the right thing and force his administration on and quell Netanyahu's loud, irritating voice. Just shut it down and enforce a ceasefire. He didn't do that. So that was clear. With Kamala Harris, all this momentum has swung. And I can feel that it might be hurtful. I've been there. I know what it feels like. It might be painful. It might suck. But this is not a bad thing. And it doesn't mean the movement is dying, but it does mean you have to change course. This is a great time because we need to wait for the information to come. We simply don't have the information that we need right now to fight Kamala, in the event that we have to. And it's very likely that we will on several things. This is a moment to be doing incredible culture work. This is the moment to be having arguments at the kitchen table and come up with this beautiful, thought-provoking, demanding, visually compelling moments. But if we just keep defaulting to protest, people get tired and you have to seize momentum. I'm gonna give you an example of what I mean when I say that, because I have been saying that. When it comes to the right, you can attack character, right? But when it comes to our side, you have to use character. Let me explain. I was talking to KR, and they were telling me they're watching a Democracy Now! Segment, and it was covering the protesters who are out in Chicago, okay? So the protesters are out in Chicago, and they're being interviewed by Democracy Now! And there are several people who are explicitly going after Tim Walz, right? And they say, we're going after Tim Walz. There were one or two other things, but the main thing was that at different points in time, he had supported Israel by maybe giving the green stamp to like, yes, you have my vote, send funds, whatever. For one, I want to be clear that in America, because of that existential thing that we're talking about, which is infuriating, you're going to be hard-pressed to find politicians across the board who have not supported Israel on some level throughout their decades-long history. That doesn't mean that we forgive them. No, it's the difference between saying, killer Kamala, genocide Joe, and you got Tim Walz. Tim Walz is a war criminal. He's a monster. He's a murderer. He has blood in his hands, right? That's one way to go about it. But that's going against the grain. It's going against you're attacking somebody's character, but you simply don't have all the information you need to do that. It's too easily dismissed. Use the character. Rather than say, Tim Walz is a genocidal piece of shit, or Tim Walz is a war criminal, Tim Walz has blood in his hands, say, Tim Walz cares about equality in America. He supports these kinds of movements. He supported this kind of money in schools. He supported this and that. Why doesn't Tim Walz, why doesn't his values extend to the children of Gaza? That's how you do it. One closes down the thing and puts yourself in opposition against a force, and the other one absorbs it. You use the character that people are presenting, not necessarily really against them, to be perfectly honest with you, but you're not putting yourself against the people's popular belief. You're absorbing it. And you're saying, hey, if this and this and this is true, which is what people believe, right? I like Tim Walz. He seems like a decent guy to me. But as you know, I care about the policies and I care about the politics. I think that he is a value add, but our job is to move these hoes where we need them to be. Rather than constantly put ourselves in opposition, say the same thing, but better, by absorbing it and not putting yourself and alienating the very folks who we're trying to compel to action. And when I say compel to action, I'm not talking about our politicians. I'm talking about the population. I'm talking about the people that you are trying to engage when you say, hey, join my protest, join my march. We are outraged, we're disgusted, we're sad. This moment when you see momentum shift, don't judge the momentum. Don't be filled with contempt for the momentum, steer it. Be the container for the momentum, because again, you can't hate the very people that you're supposed to serve. And as organizers, and as activists, as advocates, as people who care, these are acts of service, my friends. You came in here for attention, you came to the wrong fucking place. You came to the wrong place, right? You might be better off as an influencer Because at least, even if you're a micro one, you can get the kind of attention and affirmation that you need. But if you came here to do service, this is what it looks like. And this is how rhetoric works. Because if you need the reminder of how we got Jordan fucking Peterson, which I will never forgive Canada for, it was because he was seen as a target, and it's, a bunch of student organizers who were not that experienced. And these things are okay, right? But they weren't that experienced. They made him a target without thinking through a plan because they genuinely cared, and also because it was a good story that they could share with their friends. So they created a counterforce against him, or a force against him, and then a counterforce rose up, and we made a mountain of a man. That is partly why it's so essential to not do that, to not put yourself in opposition to people and their popular beliefs, but rather to absorb the people and their popular beliefs. That means that we also are not alienating them. That's an example of what I'm talking about. That's what we need to see more of. But the point is, it can feel defeating, and to the protesters out there and the organizers out there, do not be disheartened. Do not be disillusioned. This is part of the work too. But this is a great moment to gather more information and to choose your points more strategically so that you can have critical mass. Because protest isn't simply, I hate this. It's about leveraging things. It's about forcing the hands of power to move. And the truth is, protest looks different now. All we do is mass mobilize, and it doesn't hit the same way. So we've got to be strategic and think about what organizing looks like in the 21st century. And I'm happy to be a part of that fray. So with that, why don't we hit the VMs for that voice note of the day?
Hello. So I was just wondering, amidst all of these unprecedented times, how do you stay sane? Because I'm really struggling. How do you keep it all okay up there, Thank you.
I actually know the person who sent this question. It's a friend of mine. And it's so funny that she's asking that, because the truth is, I'm not sane. There's nothing sane going on upstairs right now. I'm not well. Okay? I am unhinged. I am chronically online. And it's and the only thing that's stopping me from losing my marbles completely is that my friends are frantically gathering them to try to put them back in my head. Because I've got 3 that I'm juggling, and I keep losing the rest. So I'll say, what you need is good community and maybe the love of a furry thing, and you can take liberties with whatever that means for you. But you know what? It's also this work. For a lot of you who maybe are listening, you know that this is something that I'm trying, having seen the shifts of how movements work and having seen how much we lost the narrative back in 2021, but really through all the movements. Who's keeping our stories intact? Who can look back all the way to Occupy and, Standing Rock and the Women's March and Families Belong Together and Black Lives Matter and Me Too and Stop Asian Hate, and now, ending this war in Palestine, which is perhaps the hardest thing to fight for in so many ways. A big reason is because it's not here, right? We're funding it, but it's not here. Anyway, I am a receptacle, and I'm also a person who gathers that information and those lessons and can synthesize them and be here with you. But this community is largely why I'm not going crazy, and this work fully anyway, because we all know that I am. But yeah, I'm just really grateful. And this is one of several steps in a fully fledged plan, because that's what I do. I actually never stop working. And that, I know for a lot of people that sounds nuts, but that's actually what I love to do. I love working. And being on the comedy stage allows me to be a little mischievous, a little gremlin, and popcorn at 3 a.m. Love popcorn at 3 a.m. Skinny pop fucking slaps. Okay, with that, thank you so much, y'all, for listening and being part of this community, listening to this episode. Thank you. JFK Today really is a labor of love. It means the world to me that you're here and listening. New episodes drop 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are streaming. Please send your questions in voicemail form to jfktodayShow@gmail.com. Shout out to KR and the whole JFK team, and shout out to you, the listeners, who make this all possible.